I am Jonathan Benedetti. I'm the Development Director for the East Texas Food Bank. I have been working for the food bank for 12 years. I started in 2010 as the grant writer, which grants is the subject of our chat today. Now I'm the Development Director, so I've been here for 12 years. Love the work of the food bank. Love the work you all do. What else? I'm married to the most awesome person on the planet, Kimberly, and we have 5 kiddos. And so when I'm not raising money for the food bank or running spreadsheets, I'm running around after kids. So that's my life. But I'm happy to be here with you. Anytime I get the chance to be in a room, in this case, a virtual room, with people who want to give their time and their resources and their effort to help those in need, I consider that a blessing. It's part of what makes my job so much fun. I would much rather see your face than see a spreadsheet. Or see your name if you're not sharing your face. But yeah, blessings to all of you for the work that you do. I hope that this session is beneficial. I hope it's helpful for you. I've done one variation or another of this grant writing presentation before, both in agency conferences in the past, a lifetime ago when they were in person, and also through the Agency Institute. I know I see at least one Agency Institute alum in here. So we've done that kind of a conversation. So if you hear, I'm going to scroll to the end of the video. Yeah. If you need to, that's good. That's good advice there. You can also change your view. If you click at the top right-hand corner and look on view, you can put it on speaker. I don't know that you want to see my face that big, but if you want to do it, enter at your own risk. But anyway, so I present this in like a 4-hour session at Agency Institute, and it's all condensed into 45 minutes. So we had to cut some stuff. If I go too long, I may speed up my voice and then the double time, but we'll try to get through it. Bottom line is, I hope that you can come away with at least one thing, maybe two, that you can come away from here if you are charged with writing grants or helping to write grants for your organization or any other form of fundraising for your organization, that you can at least come away with one thing that's helpful, something that you can begin doing immediately, or some knowledge that you can take back to your organization immediately to help make what you do more effective. So again, use the chat function for questions. All of these notes will be available to you for anybody who wants. I'll send you the whole thing. I won't have my jokes in there, so you'll have to write those down if you really want them, but I will send you the notes. But I do encourage you, if you are able to take notes, it helps with memory. So if there's something that really stands out to you, just jot it down so you can talk about it later or remember it later. Let's see what else. I already introduced myself. Done a lot of, I worked in grant writing for a long time and still work directly with the food bank's grant writer, Laurelyn Wagner. Anytime in the past that I've told someone, when I introduced myself as a fundraiser, or when I was a grant writer, when I would say, yeah, I write grants. You ever seen that cartoon where the character's eyeballs turn into dollar signs? That's kind of the look that I would get when I would say that I'm a grant writer and say, oh, tell me where to find these grants. And I'd say, okay, well, that may take a longer conversation. But I want to begin, my background is in journalism. And so in journalism, they say, don't bury the lead, start out with the most important thing about the story. So I'm going to share something first of all, is everybody hear me okay? Is the audio fine? I'm using, okay, good deal. Just wanted to make sure. I'm using an old headphone, so just wanted to make sure. I want to start out with, and if you heard this before, and no spoilers, please. Don't, some of you have, but no spoilers. I want to share with you, or I should ask, would you be interested in hearing the #1 most important piece of advice for grant writing that will guarantee that every single grant you write will be successfully funded, will be effective, and will bring in all the money you need for your organization? Would you like to know that? Okay, so I just led you into that one. It doesn't exist. So my apologies for that joke. There is no one size fits all answer to grant writing. I'm going to go through some principles, but nothing is a guarantee. It takes diligent effort. It takes knowledge. It takes communication. It takes partnership. When I first started as the grant writer for the food bank, I was overwhelmed. I had no prior experience in grant writing. Again, my degree is in journalism. I'd done some work in copywriting for some little fundraising stuff here and there, but I had no experience in grant writing. When I started, I was so overwhelmed with the task in front of me that this organization was trusting me to bring in grant funding. I was overwhelmed. If I'm being honest, that first day, before I went to lunch, I just wanted to go hide in a room somewhere because I was overwhelmed with the responsibility. It was as if I was thrown into the deep end of the pool and told to swim. Does anybody else resonate with that? Have you ever felt that way? Maybe you're the person that your organization has said, hey, you know about this, or at least maybe you volunteered but didn't know exactly what all you were volunteering for. That happens once or twice in nonprofits, and it was told that, well, you're going to write grants. Well, I want to encourage you that even though it may seem overwhelming and it may seem like a daunting task to be thrown into the deep end of the pool, you might say it this way: you can learn to swim. So hopefully these tools that I give you will at least help you get started. This is a general overview. So, but this will point you in the right direction. So we're going to go through 3 lists of 10. That's my goal. I love lists. I make lists all the time. We're going to go through 3 lists of 10. The first list is a list of 10 things you will commonly see in grant proposals. The second list is my favorite. My personal favorite is the top 10 grant writing mistakes, things you want to avoid. And then the third list is top 10 or just 10 tips for effective writing. So that's a lot. We're going to blow through it pretty fast. And again, all of these notes are available for anyone who wants to ask. So let's get started. We're going to talk about 10 sections or contents of typical grant proposals. A couple of things at the top. Almost every grant application is different, but these are some things that I have seen regularly. Sometimes these different sections will be combined. Sometimes the information will overlap. But all of that, but at least some of this will be in every single grant application that you ever see. Oftentimes, the question in an application will be explained, and this is true for any of these sections, and there will be several particular things listed. It is very important to know going in, if a grant funder asks for something, you want to answer it. It's not up to you. It's not up to me to say, well, I don't think that piece of information is relevant, so I think I'll skip that one. You want to be as thorough as possible. So for example, if they're asking about your organization, and sometimes they'll just say, describe your organization, which leaves it up to you. But sometimes they may list specific things, which we'll get into in a minute. If something specific is mentioned, excuse me, you want to address every aspect. Okay, so 10 sections of typical grant proposals. The first one is a cover letter. The cover letter introduces or reacquaints the funder with your agency. It briefly describes your core work or the program that you're requesting funding for, and it includes the first ask or the first request for funding. Now, a lot of grant applications have moved into the digital space. I would probably a good majority of the grants we work with now are submitted online, but some of them we still put together paper proposals that we print out, we put them in a nice folder, and we slap a cover letter on the top of it. It's just a good thing to do. It's basically like it's like the preview of coming attractions. It just gives your request in a nutshell. It introduces, if maybe if this organization has never heard of you, and it just says it. It's a page at the most. No dissertation length cover letters. You want it to be simple. You want it to be short. So that's number one, a cover letter. Number two is the organization description. Now, there, in some form or fashion, you are going to be invited to describe your organization. That can include everything from your history to your mission statement, to your vision statement, to the core work that you do, the list of programs that you offer and provide, the geographic area that you serve, any accomplishments or awards that your agency, has has been awarded, anything like that. In this section and throughout all sections of a grant proposal, and I'm going to say this over and over again, if there is, I mean, I was joking earlier about the one thing because there are no guarantees, but if there is one thing that I want you to remember is that your goal in writing a grant is to communicate that you or your organization is the best investment of a grant funder's money. It is important to cast a big picture of the need. It's important to tug on the heartstrings, all of those things. But at the end of the day with grants, you want to communicate that you are the best investment of grant funds, because depending on what size organization it is or grant funder it is, they are going to be reading a lot of proposals. And there are a lot of organizations doing a lot of good work, including yours. So they want to invest their money where it makes the biggest difference. They want to leave an impact, because even though, especially when you're submitting online grant proposals, it may seem like this nameless, faceless, nebulous digital blob foundation, there's a person behind that. There's a person behind the screen. There's a person who writes checks. There are people who, just like you, want to make a difference in the world. And if they're tasked with distributing grant funding, they want it to be a good investment that provides a good return. They want to be involved in a partnership with an organization that's doing good in the world. So anyway, that was kind of a sidebar, but in your organization description, this is a good opportunity. It's usually early in the grant proposal or the application. It's a good opportunity to begin laying the groundwork, sowing the seeds to communicate that you are a good investment of grant funding. So that's the second section. Excuse me. Number 3 is the need statement. Every grant proposal is going to, whether it's a simple letter or a detailed application document, is going to require some sort of need statement. And this is not what you need. So the need statement is not, we need a truck, or we need a bigger building, or whatever. The need statement is the need of the clients or neighbors or community that you serve. What is the problem that your organization is seeking to solve? That is the need statement. Now, this can include high-level statistics, and it can, or high-level academic studies. I know we don't use them a whole lot, but sometimes that's helpful. Again, you're trying to communicate that you're a good investment, which means that you know something about the work that you do. Well, obviously, you know plenty about the work that you do, but maybe you know about particular studies that have been done about hunger or malnutrition or whatever. These things are important to gather and keep together and can be really helpful in making your case. So that's kind of the big picture, but it can also include client stories. Grant writing is an interesting balance of creative and persuasive writing on the one hand, making a case that there are people who are going to bed hungry, people that need help, who are at risk, but then also technical writing. So it's both persuasive writing and technical writing. It's kind of a dance. So you want to include both. So that includes both statistics and client stories. So a couple tips on this need statement. Don't paint a bigger picture of the need than what your organization can realistically impact. Now, we know the needs of people who are struggling are connected. They don't exist in silos. Like, the issues that people in poverty face are intertwined. But if you're an organization that specifically is about feeding people who are hungry, or providing other services, don't spend a lot of time in the need statement painting a picture of a whole bunch of need that your organization is not working to meet. Keep it focused, keep it tight when you're describing it. So focus on food insecurity or hunger or, homelessness or whatever it is. Okay, so, and then the other tip, don't describe the problem as just a lack of what you are proposing. I'll say that again, because that might be a little confusing. When you're describing the need or the problem, don't describe it as just a lack of what you're proposing. It's not enough to just say, hey, the problem is we don't have, we don't, this is for example, this might not hit you, but we don't have a senior center in our community. So the solution is we need a senior center. The problem in that case might be that our neighbors, it's our seniors in our community are isolated and malnourished. That's the need. It's not just that, and it's not just restating the problem. So that's the need statement. Number 4 is the project or program description, or a description of your agency's core work. This can include everything from a description of your activities. How does your program work? How does your agency work? How do people find out about it? How do people sign up for your services? How often are you open? What are your hours? How much food do you distribute to the program? Who's your, it could be any number of things that just basically describe your project and program. And you want to describe it in a way that people who don't know anything about you can clearly understand it. This is one of the challenges because we work in our fields all the time. We understand, and sometimes there's an assumption that people know what it is that we do or know what the need is. Now, don't dumb it down, then if you can use that language, but make it clear to someone who is not already initiated in this field or in this work. And a good way to do that as a heads up is if you've written something, get somebody to read it who doesn't know much about your work. Make sure it's clear and understandable. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So how will the need be addressed? So like I said earlier, it's important to paint a realistic picture of the need, but it's not enough to just talk about needs, to say people are hungry, people are struggling. You have to talk about solutions. And remember, throughout the proposal, you're communicating to the grant funder why your organization is the blank. Like if somebody want to throw that in the chat, your organization is the blank of their grant funds. Anybody remember? Any guesses?
Best investment.
Best investment. There you go. Your organization is the best investment of their grant funds. So how are you addressing the need? And in that, you want this funder to see the actual impact that their dollars are going to have, the difference that it's going to make. Because remember, this is a person or people. This is a partnership. These are people who want to do good in the world. They want to know that they're making a difference too, just like you do, just like I do. Okay, so the project description could also include how clients are served, how often, how much, a timeline for project activities. You want to communicate that your program is well planned, follows effective best practices, and it's based on experience or evidence of what makes a difference. Now, this may take a little brainstorming to think through this. Because you may just say, hey, it's pretty simple. People are hungry. Hungry people need food. We give them food. That's what we do. So think through this, talk through this with other people, other volunteers or staff at your organization, and think, what would it look like to describe how what we do is based on experience and evidence? So keep that in mind. Okay, so number 5, target population. And this kind of overlaps with the needs section, but who does your organization or your specific program serve? Is it all low-income people, families, households? Is it children specifically, if it's a program? Is it seniors? Is it people with blue eyes who were born on a Wednesday in October? No, not that specific, but who does your organization serve? And this section could also include client demographics. It can include things, and some grant applications will ask for this. This is a little bit more of challenging information to get, such as ethnicity, gender, age, socioeconomic status. And if you're ever filling out a grant application and you run into something like this and you say, oh, I don't know if I have that information, I don't know what to do, you can always reach out to us. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to our grant writer, Laurelyn Wagner, or reach out to Charles or whoever, and they can forward it on to us. We want to help you be able to effectively write grants that you're writing. So, so that's the target population. Number 6 is the budget. Everybody's favorite, the budget. Who likes budgeting? Does anybody like budgeting? Okay, so if you do, we are all thankful for you because we need people like you in our lives who give attention to detail and numbers. Now, I have to for my job, but I'm not a big fan of it. But budget is important. You will most likely need to provide a detailed budget. Sometimes it's in a separate attachment. Sometimes it's in the body of your proposal. Sometimes it's going to include a justification for your budget line items. That might be the calculations you used, why you chose particular items to be funded by this particular grant funder. These are all important parts of the budget and how you communicate the budget. Sometimes it will require other sources of revenue or funding, whether that's already received or pending, and perhaps as important as any of them, how exactly their money factors into the budget. What their, if they're just supporting your organization with general gift, then it's not as crucial. You're just talking about your overall operations. But if it's for a specific project, if it's for a specific kind of distribution, you want to paint the picture for how their money is making an impact and what their money is going toward. Check your math. Check it again, and then check it again. You would be surprised when you're looking at something, staring at something all day, how easy it is to miss things. Make sure your math adds up, because that is a problem if you're submitting a grant proposal and your budget doesn't add up. That doesn't really communicate good investment. So number 7, the 7th section of the grant proposal you might see is goals. Grant funders are going to want to know, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And this might include two terms that you may see are outcomes and outputs. And these might sound identical, but they're a little bit different. Outcomes, you can think of it this way. Outcomes are the broad, outcomes are more broad. It's what changes for people who are served by the program. So some examples could include increased access to emergency food assistance, better understanding of nutrition. These are kind of broad outcomes that you want to see, overarching things. Outputs are the more detailed metrics that you expect, such as number of neighbors served, number of meals provided, number of boxes distributed, number of pounds of food, number of meat, whatever. Those are that gets into the detail. So outcomes, big, broad, overarching goals, and then outputs are the specific metrics. This goals section could also include a timeline for accomplishing those goals. Most often, if you get a grant, the grant period is going to be 12 months. That's how much time you have to spend the money. So you want to spend the money in the time that you're allotted in the way that you said you were going to spend it. So little pro tip, don't wait until the end of the 12-month grant period if you get a grant to check and see if you've spent it. Keep track of it the whole year. Ask me how I know at another time. So also with goals, don't overpromise. You may feel the pressure when trying to make a compelling case for your organization that you need to promise the moon, that you're going to do all this stuff. Now, it's important to have ambitious goals. You don't want to set the bar too low. However, grant funders see this stuff all the time. You don't want to say you're going to do all of this and then come back 12 months and say, well, we did a third of it or whatever. Be honest. Remember, grant funders are partners, they're in partnership with what you're doing. So that's goals. Number 8, evaluation plan. How will you measure success? This is going to be really important when it comes time to submit a grant report. How are you going to measure success? Excuse me. You're going to describe the type of information that you're going to collect, explain how you will collect and track that information, and describe how you will evaluate the overall effectiveness of the program. You state it up front, and that makes your job a lot easier when it comes time for a grant report, because you've made it really clear what you're going to do. So number 9, sustainability. This is one of the more difficult subjects to address, because you might think it makes your grant proposal more compelling if you just, really pull out all the stops and say, if you don't give us this grant, everything's going to fall apart. if you don't give us this grant, our doors are going to shut tomorrow. We need this grant so bad. And if you don't get it to us, everybody's going to go hungry. That may seem like a compelling case, but again, you're talking about best investment. If a grant funder thinks, hey, if my money goes away, what's going to happen to all this good work? Now, you still want to communicate that you need their money. Obviously, you need their money or you wouldn't be asking for their support. But you also want to communicate that they are not the only source of funding for your organization, that you have a plan for sustainability. And even though sustainability is not only about fundraising, fundraising is a big part of it. Grant funders want to know that their money can be leveraged for additional success in the future. Now, it may be a grant funder that comes back and they give you another grant next year and the year after that. You may have such a good partnership that they are an annual supporter, but it might be a one-time thing. And they want to know, if I'm going to invest this one-time gift, I want to know that it is going to have a lasting impact. So that's sustainability. Oh, and just a little hint. The answer to the question of how will you sustain your program is not, we will sustain our program if you give us a grant next year. That does not communicate confidence. So that's number 9. And number 10 in sections, things that you commonly see in grant proposals are attachments. So there's a lot of attachments that are often requested. I'll just real briefly go through a list of these. One of them is your IRS tax exempt letter that shows that you are a 501c3 nonprofit. We include this with everything. It's just good practice. Second is audited financial statements. Now, I know that not everyone does an audit, and this is a difficult one. Audits are expensive, they're time consuming, and they're difficult, but just know up front that some grants you will not be even eligible to apply for if you do not have an audited financial statement. Some grant funders will accept unaudited, just internal financial statements, your income statement and balance sheet and all that, but some grant funders will require an audit. So don't spend a whole lot of time writing a grant proposal that requires an audit and then get to the end and think, oh, it's not for nothing. You can still use that content somewhere else, but just, save yourself the grief and aggravation. So maybe year-to-date financial statements, sometimes it's something that they ask for. Your IRS Form 990, which is also known as the return of organization exempt from income tax that nonprofits are required to file yearly, might be your organizational budget. Hope you have an organizational budget. You're going to need it. Your program or project budget. If you're asking for specific funding, in your board of directors list. So with attachments, another little pro tip is have all of these easily accessible in one place, digitally, in a file on your computer that you can go to, and every time you do a grant, let's say, oh my goodness, what did we do with that board of directors list? Have them all ready and ready to submit, and so that it saves some time. Okay, so that's sections of a grant proposal. Let's get to the fun part. The next thing that we're going to talk about is top 10 grant writing mistakes. And I'll just be honest, I've made a lot of mistakes. And if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. But the more that you know ahead of time, the less likely it is that you will make some of these mistakes. So number 10, we'll do it like David Letterman style. We'll count down 10 to number 1. Number 10, writing one big grant proposal and sending it out to everyone you can think of. I have seen this. I worked with someone, and I don't remember who it was. So if it was you, my apologies, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, but someone took me up on my offer to proofread their grant proposal, and they sent me this massive document. They put a lot of time in this thing. It was probably 40 pages long. They put everything that they could think of. I'm guessing maybe that they went online and saw, Googled how to write a grant proposal and got all these different sections, maybe even some of the sections I've talked about today, and put it all together in one document. And their plan was just to shotgun this thing out to 50 different funders without knowledge of what that funder actually is interested in, of what their requirements are, of what their proposal looked like. It was just one big grant proposal. And so I gently responded and said, hey, you really need to focus for every grant proposal you send out. You need to know who you're sending it to. And so I went through a few things. I never heard back from them. So I hope that they took my advice to heart. And if not, hopefully their shotgun approach, they threw something on the wall and maybe it stuck, we can hope. But don't do that. So that's number 10. Number 9, ignoring the funders' giving priorities. If they say they give toward education or just only give toward healthcare or medical supplies, whatever it is, or environmental issues, don't just try to push through that and say, oh, well, you want to fund us too. Pay attention to their giving priorities, because you only have a limited amount of time. So you want to know that your work is going to have the most impact. Number 8, ignoring the funder's application guidelines. Maybe it's sending something they didn't ask for, or not sending what they did ask for. Maybe it's not submitting the correct word count or font size or whatever. Pay attention to the application guidelines. And that also includes their geographic focus. Maybe they don't even fund organizations in Texas. Maybe you just found a foundation online somewhere and they don't give to your area. Know that going in. So number 7, not answering all questions in the application. Again, a big no-no. If they put it in there, you answer it to the best of your ability. And if it's just not applicable, explain why it's not applicable. Don't just put like NA, or especially don't just leave it blank. Number 6, being unclear about exactly what you want to accomplish with the grant funds. It's not enough to just say, just give us the money and we'll do some good stuff. Trust us. You want to be really clear about what you're going to do with the funds. Number 5, grant writing mistakes, things to avoid. Submitting a budget that doesn't add up. Not to be too redundant, but add up your numbers, add them up again, make sure it all makes sense and is clear and adds up properly. Number 4, not giving yourself enough time to gather information and write the proposal. If there was a Procrastinators Anonymous group, I would be right in the middle of it. I struggle. Anybody else struggle with that? I mean, why do something today when you can put it off to tomorrow? I mean, that's generally my life principle. And I have this ongoing conversation with my wife because we're polar opposites on this. She would much rather get all her stuff done and then she can sit down and enjoy her day. I'm like, man, it's about the journey, not the destination. Let's just enjoy it. If I'm going to do housework, I get my playlist out. I put on specific music I want to listen to wash dishes or whatever. Or I'm like, we got 5 days on that. I can kick it down the field or whatever. And then when you get to the last minute, then it's like stress, nothing but stress for the last period of time. Do yourself a favor and don't put it off to the last minute, especially if you are dependent on other people for information. This has happened to us too, where we waited to the last minute, or I waited to the last minute to write something. And then when I went into the application, I realized, oh no, I didn't see that question. I can't answer that question. I have to go get this information from this other person who just happens to be off work today. Save yourself the grief and aggravation and the stress. Life's stressful enough. Don't add to it. So number 3, writing it and reading it all by yourself. Don't do it. Bring someone else in to read it. Number 2, missing the deadline. That seems common sense. And honestly, there's probably a couple of grant funders out there who will give you a grace period, who will say, yeah, bring it on in. But in most cases, if they have and some grant funders will accept applications all year long. So that's your friend. Maybe their board meets multiple times a year, or maybe they just evaluate fundraising or funding requests throughout the year. But if they have a deadline, don't miss it. That's one of the big no-nos. And then number 1, I would say put it number 1, thinking that grants are a magic solution that will solve all your financial problems. They're not. Grants are one stream of revenue and income that can help your organization. It's a very important one, but it is not the only one. A grant is not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that is going to make all of your problems go away. Sometimes people or organizations think about grants this way. If I could just get this grant. Now, will it help? You better believe it. Absolutely it will. But it's not a one and done. It doesn't fix everything. So, okay, so that's We're 2/3 of the way through here. The next and the final top 10 list I've got for you today in our Grant Writing 101 session. Incidentally, if you're here, I should have put some more thought into a more creative title. But if you're here with that extremely bland title, you must really want to know stuff about grants. So last one, top 10 tips for effective writing. Number one, give yourself enough time to write well. That's just stating the obvious in another way. Give yourself enough time to write well. It takes time. When I was, in composition class in school, I hated rough drafts. I was like, I don't need no stinking rough draft. I can write it perfect the first time. Who needs rough drafts? That's kind of how I would approach it. I was like, I want to write a Pulitzer Prize winning piece of literature the very first time. That's a lot of pressure. Give yourself plenty of time, write a draft, update your draft, and that's going to take a lot of time. Give yourself time to do it well. Number two, be clear, write clearly. Again, make it so clear that someone who is not initiated or doesn't know the language and the work can actually understand it. Number three, be concise, get to the point. I love words. I generally am like, why use one word when you can use 10? I love talking about ideas. I love all of that. It sounds like I'm not the only one. I generally, I don't really know exactly what I think about something until I talk about it. I mean, I'm a kind of a verbal processor. It helps me to get stuff out there. So being concise is not necessarily my strong suit. But in grant writing, it is important to be very economical with your word choice. You want to be thorough, but you want to be concise. Don't use 2 sentences when one will do. It doesn't make your case any better by just adding and adding and adding words. Cut unnecessary words or phrases or sentences. So here's a great example of what never to do. You don't want this in your grant application. It is currently anticipated that the East Texas Food Bank will collaborate with ABC Food Pantry to accomplish the projected outcomes related to this important program as described in the previous section, with the ultimate goal of said outcomes being achieved in the most timely and efficient manner possible, according to best practices identified by ETFB through similar collaborations in previous years and implemented with due diligence through evidence-based strategies that are designed to yield optimum outcomes and ultimately which will have the most effectual impact on clients served by the program. One sentence. I'm actually very proud of that sentence, but no one should ever use that. You want to be concise. You want to get to the point as quickly as possible. So number 4, be urgent, but not sensational. It's kind of a delicate balance. You want to be urgent because hunger is a crisis. The fact that people don't have enough food or they don't have enough to feed their kids, it's a crisis. It is urgent, but don't be sensational, In fundraising appeals or in grant applications, don't exaggerate. Be truthful, be honest and not sensational. Don't lead with, the kids in our community are dying of starvation at this very moment if you don't give us this grant, That's probably a little bit of an extreme example. Be urgent, but not sensational. Number 5, be persuasive. This can include an emotional appeal, including client stories, but persuasiveness in grant writing in grant proposals is more about communicating that you understand the need and that you know how to meet that need effectively and efficiently. That's compelling. That's persuasive to a grant funder. Includes the emotional appeal, but that's the ball game right there. You are the best investment of their funds. Number 6, use active voice and strong, determined language. This is important in all writing, but in grant writing as well, when you're trying to make your words more economical and effective. So an example might be, passive voice would sound something like students will be recruited to participate in the program. That's fine, but better would be an active voice or active language. Our outreach workers will recruit students to participate in the program. So it's not like this is a thing that's happening. This is what we are doing. So another example, you want your language to be strong and determined. You use language like increase, improve, empower, engage, feed. So instead of, we project that this program will be implemented if possible so that children are able to be fed on a weekly basis. Better approach is, our food pantry will distribute food every Friday to hungry children in our community. Simple, tight, and active, determined, strong language. Okay. Number 7, avoid jargon, abbreviations, or buzzwords. Now, this might be a struggle for you, but sometimes I want to, just like bang my head on the desk in some webinars that I listen to for all the jargon that's used. Don't use this in grant proposals. Now, if someone understands the language, you might say, like the hunger study of Feeding America, map the meal gap. You've heard that thrown around. If someone doesn't know, what that is, don't say, well, map the meal gap says blah, 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 or whatever. Just try to eliminate jargon or abbreviations or buzzwords. Even something like food insecurity, which can be a confusing term. If who you're talking to or writing to does not understand what food insecurity means, don't use it. Or if you use it, explain what it means. That's probably the better route. Number 8, tips for effective writing: cut and paste. Cut and paste. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. When I first started grant writing, I thought I had to write this tremendous proposal from scratch every time. Otherwise, it was I was not being true to to my creativity. Cut and paste is often. Now, make sure you change the names and the numbers if you're going to do that. But work smart, not hard. No, I mean, work hard too, but make sure you're working smart. My boss used to say that to me: work smart, not hard. Proofread. That's number 9. Proofread everything that you write. Go back over it, maybe the next day, to make sure that you don't miss something. And then finally, number 10, have someone else proofread it. And I said that earlier. Ideally, someone who understands your organization and your mission, but then also someone who isn't initiated. So you can see, does this make sense to people? Did my wording make sense, etc. So, okay, well, that's the 10 tips for effective writing. Wow, we got through it all, didn't we? I'm sorry, looks like we didn't really have. Okay, I just saw that there's a on that I missed. I hope that I didn't miss somebody's question. We're almost out of time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you may already have my contact information, but I'm going to put my email address and my direct line here at the food bank. If you want to follow up with me with any questions about what I've talked about, if you want to get a copy of my notes, if you want us to proofread one of your grant proposals that you're working on, always feel free to reach out. And I'd be happy to help in whatever way that I can. So looks like we're right up on time. We got 2 minutes. Just as a final note of encouragement before this session ends, the work we do can be overwhelming, whether it's distributing boxes or running reports or spreadsheets or writing grants or whatever it is. It can be overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like there is a lot more need than there's a lot more need than I got time for or resources for. There's a story in the Bible that's known as the story of the feeding of the 5,000, where I'm sure most of you have heard this story, where there's a whole group of people who are sitting out on the hillside and they're really hungry, and one very kind little boy brings 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish and bring them to Jesus, and it's basically the only buffet they've got there for the day. The disciples of Jesus say, "What is this among so many? What is this little bit of provision?" And we can feel that way sometimes. We can feel like the little bit that we have just isn't enough to go around. The time that we have, the staff that we have, the volunteers that we have, the money that we have isn't enough. I want to encourage you today to not get weary in doing good. The work that you're doing is good. And when we all work together, it is amazing what will happen when we stick with it, when we don't give up, and we don't grow weary in well-doing. The provision that we will experience, not just for our sake, but for the sake of the precious, beloved neighbors that we serve. So be encouraged today. You're doing good work. And if you're really confused about grant writing, call me anytime. Okay.